Newsroom in New York, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And in Washington, Eric Seberide, Roger Mudd, Robert Pierpoint, Stephen Rowan, Richard Threlkeld in South Vietnam, Ike Pappas in Chicago, and Craig Kindle in Indianapolis.
Good evening. Defying a threatened veto, the Senate today finally passed that tax reform bill by a substantial margin. But after 13 days of debate, the measure is so different from that passed by the House and so loaded down with riders that it faces substantial alteration in a conference committee. Roger Mudd reports.
The final vote was 69 to 22, hardly a surprise. Only two Democrats, Russell of Georgia and Holland of Florida, voted no. But 18 Republicans, ignoring the well-known White House opposition, joined 51 Democrats in clearing the bill. The vote was sandwiched in between partisan denunciation and praise for the bill, the biggest tax measure since the income tax became law in 1913. As approved by the Senate, the bill raises personal exemptions from the present $600 to $800. It raises Social Security benefits by 15%. It gives special tax relief to around 12 million poor, but it raises taxes on the rich and the corporations by squeezing about $5 billion worth of loopholes. Comment after the vote left no doubt that the other side was to blame.
Well, instead of being a day of which the Senate can be proud, I'm afraid this was a low point in the history of the Senate. It was a slap and a rebuff at Senator John Williams and others who have worked for meaningful and responsible tax reform. The product of the Senate, I'm afraid, is a hodgepodge of political goodies that no longer deserves the title of tax reform.
The Nixon-Agnew administration and several of the Republican senators are firmly set against giving tax relief by way of giving more recognition to dependents. I think the man who needs tax relief most is the man with the most dependents to support. The fellow living in the suburbs with a big mortgage on a little house filled with children.
Social Security recipients think they're going to get a 15% increase across the board. They've been led to think they're going to get a minimum of $100. That's what this bill provides. They've been led to, in this bill, it provides that everybody can retire at the age of 60 and draw his retirement now. The people think they're going to get that. In addition to that, they think they're going to get quite a reduction in taxes, the exemptions raised by $200. All of these things are nice. But I don't think, and I don't think any member of this Senate thinks, that the conferees are going to come back and give it to them. And to me, that's just a cruel hoax on the part of a lot of people that we shouldn't be kidding.
Williams surprised his colleagues by refusing to serve as one of the Senate's conferees with the House. The conference committee must now resolve more than 100 substantial differences between the two versions. And despite this afternoon's oratory, most members expect a bill reasonably acceptable to the president will emerge. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Washington.
For the sixth time in the last 7 market sessions, the Dow Jones Industrials closed today at a new low for the year, just a shade over 783. Volume on the New York Stock Exchange was 10,400,000 shares. The New York Index did gain 2 cents, and the American Exchange Index was up 3 cents.
Grandma, only sissies dress up.
Time you turn into a lady. First we wash that hair.
Can't use a little shampoo.
Just a little bit.
Where'd you get all those suds?
Prel Concentrate.
Hey, didn't bust.
Why, you are a lady.
A sissy.
Hi, this is Mrs. Betty Jones back from a family fishing trip for a biz demonstration. Did you catch anything?
A whole week's worth of things like fish blood, beet stains.
Biz soaks out a lot of stains that you can't wash or bleach out. Even stains that other pre-soakers don't get out. Let's soak them.
Eddie Albert knows Biz is the extra strength pre-soaker. Look, a tough food stain like this soaked in another pre-soaker doesn't all wash out. But an identical stain pre-soaked in Biz does. Now back to Eddie.
Well, Betty?
Biz did it. Stain's gone.
Try Biz. Biz is better.
The White House had a long discussion over breakfast with President Nixon today. Robert Pierpoint reports.
After a 2-hour and 10-minute breakfast, the two presidents appeared outside the White House to pose briefly for photographers. They had breakfasted alone, according to Presidential News Secretary Ronald Ziegler, who said they talked most of the time about world affairs. Neither had anything to say to the reporters on hand, but Mr. Nixon did lead Mr. Johnson over to a group of tourists who'd been waiting in the cold for quite some time to get a glimpse of the unusual pair. Among the items they had discussed, said Ziegler, were Vietnam, of course, recent developments in Russian-American relations, including specifically the strategic arms limitations talks now being held in Helsinki, and the visit here last month by Japan's Prime Minister Sato. Ziegler said they also talked about the federal budget and the economy, but apparently not about domestic politics. Former President Johnson looked a little more mauled and a bit heavier than when he left here 11 months ago, and he seemed a good deal more subdued. Robert Pierpoint, CBS News, Washington.
At Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah today, a small amount of deadly nerve gas escaped from a storage container which was being repaired and caused evacuation of persons in the area. However, the gas was rendered harmless and there were no casualties. The spokesman said there never was any danger outside the immediate area on the grounds. An accident during testing of nerve gas at Dugway early last year killed 6,000 sheep, you'll remember. A controversy has developed at the House Armed Services Subcommittee probe into the My Lai killings. The flap was touched off by reports published today concerning the testimony of an American helicopter pilot who appeared at the closed-door hearings yesterday. Stephen Rowan has the story.
The helicopter pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson, told the committee he argued with Lieutenant William Calley over the fate of wounded Vietnamese civilians he was trying to rescue from a spot where he saw between 26 and 50 dead men, women, and children. A committee source, who insists on remaining unidentified, says Thompson indicated that his helicopter guns were trained on the men of Calley's platoon during the argument. Pressed by at least 4 committee members to explain why, Thompson replied again and again, "I don't like to get shot at by anybody, sir." Thompson said that when he told Calley he intended to rescue the wounded, Calley said, "The only way you're going to get them out of there is with a grenade." The pilot declined to offer an explanation of that remark. He said he loaded 6 to 9 of the wounded on his chopper and flew off. One of the victims, a child, died en route to the hospital. Committee Chairman Mendel Rivers was angered by the stories about what Thompson said and declared that no committee member would be allowed to say more until the inquiry has reached some conclusions. So far it hasn't, because of testimony that at least some of the deaths were caused by an artillery and naval gunfire barrage, and because Warrant Officer Thompson refused to characterize what happened, merely confirming that he did report unnecessary shooting by Calley's platoon. Chairman Rivers barred radio and TV microphones from the hallway today, and when he emerged had only one comment about the stories leaked to the press. Whoever supplied them, he said, is a damn liar. Today's witness, Captain Ernest Medina, told the committee just what he has said in public, that he did not order a massacre and saw no evidence one had occurred. Stephen Rowan, CBS News, Washington.
The latest weekly Vietnam casualty toll released today lists 100 American combat deaths with another 592 U.S. soldiers wounded. A UPI report last night that American deaths would be the lowest of any week in 3 years proved to be erroneous. South Vietnam reported the loss of 411 men, and enemy deaths were put at 2,469. 2 American helicopter crewmen have been released by the Viet Cong after being held prisoners for 38 days. The men identified as Warrant Officer Michael Peterson of Redmond, Washington, and Sergeant Vern Shepard of Akron, Ohio, both 21, showed up at an Allied military base in the Central Highlands yesterday. They're suffering from minor wounds and malnutrition. Battle action in the Central Highlands has eased off in recent days, but CBS News correspondent Richard Threlkeld recorded this dramatic vignette of war when the enemy was pressing the attack.
They call this place the Volcano, and right now it's the single most hellish spot in all of South Vietnam. A pile of volcanic rock 3 miles from the Cambodian border. On top, a few companies of South Vietnamese infantry troops crowded into an area no bigger than a couple of tennis courts. And at the bottom, all around the volcano, swarms of North Vietnamese regulars. Constant American air and artillery strikes have so far failed to dislodge the enemy troops. or to stop the enemy gunners from pounding the volcano with a frightening array of mortar and rocket shells. The volcano's defenders spend most of their time crouching in trenches and bunkers. When they do venture above ground, it's only to grab something to eat and to dig their trenches even deeper.
You've been getting incoming almost constantly.
Well, this, not exactly constantly. We get them at intermittent times, usually from the east and from the west simultaneously now, with rockets and 75 recoilless rifles and 82 mortars.
Every day, a camp reconnaissance unit sweeps the base of the hill looking for the enemy and usually finds him. 3 North Vietnamese were killed on this afternoon in a series of firefights only 200 yards away. These little battles have been costing the government troops casualties too, part of the price for keeping the perimeter secure. On this day, the volcano had some visitors, the CBS News team and a French correspondent, Alain Saint-Paul of Agence France-Presse. Saint-Paul took a few pictures, then crouched in a bunker when somebody shouted, "Incoming." A second later, a huge rocket fell almost on top of Saint-Paul and killed him instantly. It also killed one Vietnamese officer next to him and critically wounded another. CBS cameraman Dong Van Rhee was also hit, but he continued to film the aftermath as the camp's medical team pulled out the living and the dead.
Alain Saint-Paul was a good photographer. He was also my friend. A little while ago, he was doing what he liked best, taking pictures of the Vietnam War, and muttering in his thick French accent, "Good story, very good story." Now he is dead. He is not the first newsman to die in Vietnam, and he probably will not be the last. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, in the Central Highlands.
President Thieu today lashed out at elected officials within his government who advocate neutralism or a coalition regime with the communists. Thieu said that neutralism would be national suicide, with the communists taking over within a year. In case of a coalition, Thieu predicted the communists would be in full control within 6 months. Thieu's particular target in today's statement was South Vietnam's House of Representatives. Thieu has been urging the House to punish 3 of its members who have spoken in favor of neutrality. Hanoi's top negotiator, Xuan Thuy, boycotted today's session of the Paris talks in retaliation for President Nixon's failure to name a ranking successor to Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge. The communist spokesman said that Thuy just did not feel like attending. South Korea has asked the International Red Cross to do all it can to secure the release of passengers on one of its airliners that was hijacked to Wonsan, North Korea today. It's not certain at this hour whether there were any Americans aboard among those 50 persons. It is believed the hijackers were 2 men posing as Army officers. Israel and Syria fought a pitched air battle on the outskirts of Damascus today as the Israeli jets raided a major MiG airfield. Syria admitted that their 3 MiGs were shot down, but claimed 2 Israeli jets were destroyed. Israel said all its planes returned safely.
About 100 years ago, the cowboy and longhorn first traveled the Chisholm Trail. And when a man wanted a good smoke, he had to roll his own. Today, things are a little different.
Come to Marlboro Country.
Well, if it isn't the little old engine cleaner. Sure, a cleaner engine helps your car get better mileage. Brilliant thinking. But pretty rough on your engine. Help clean inside your engine with mobile detergent gasoline. We clean up what most gasolines make dirty.
Former astronaut John Glenn Jr., the first American to orbit the Earth, today declared his candidacy for the Senate. He told a news conference in Columbus, Ohio, that he will seek the Democratic nomination to succeed retiring Senator Stephen Young. The Democratic field also is expected to include Young's former campaign manager. The major Republican candidates are Governor James Rhodes and Congressman Robert Taft Jr. The House Appropriations Committee today voted an extra $10 million to cut off marijuana and narcotics at the Mexican border. The money, part of a catch-all appropriations bill, is to be used for 915 additional agents, more equipment, and expanded training. In Chicago, that raid in which 2 Black Panthers died in a shootout with police continues making headlines. CBS News correspondent Ike Pappas reports.
State's Attorney Edward Hanrahan said he could wait no longer, that he had to reveal the details of the Hampton killing in order to defend his officers from charges that they deliberately killed the Illinois Black Panther leader in a political assassination. Hanrahan, at a press conference, disputed the claims of the Black Panthers that the police shot first. Hanrahan, in fact, challenged the Panthers to lie detector tests.
We challenge the other persons in that apartment to be as forthright as our police officers. If those other persons in that apartment will take a lie detector test, then we would allow our police officers to do so.
The Panthers charged this was a political assassination, that Hampton was marked, that your office got him. How do you react to that?
That's patently ridiculous. That's the type of propaganda statement that I deplore, having been publicized by practically all the media, particularly when that type of irresponsible statement was made by a person who had no basis for making it. The fact is that none of our officers knew, nor did anyone in our office know, that Hampton was in that apartment when we sought to serve the warrant there. The further fact is that the death of Mr. Hampton and the other individual occurred as a consequence of the occupants firing first upon our police officers.
The Panthers continued to take scores of people through the house in which Hampton was killed. As to the lie detector challenge, Panther leaders were said to be discussing this with their lawyers and would make their decision known later on. The Panthers say on their guided tours through the apartment that there is no evidence of any shotgun blasts being directed from inside outward toward the police, that all of the fire was incoming from the police in an attempt to murder Hampton. In answering that, Attorney Hanrahan asks his own question, would I send 14 men to kill one? Ike Pappas, CBS News, Chicago.
Harvard University today suspended 40 black students who were among a group of about 100 who battered down a door and took over the main administration building. Officials also obtained a court injunction ordering an end to the protest. The seizure was part of continuing demonstrations seeking more jobs for blacks in campus construction projects. Harvard has 15,000 students. Jackie Robinson, the former baseball player, charged the Nixon administration today with letting the nation drift toward a bloody racial confrontation. And in his words, someone, somewhere in government had better get moving, or I shudder to think of the consequences. Robinson, a Negro who supported President Nixon, complained about the conservative nature of the men closest to the president. To quote him, the attitudes of the Thurmans, the Mitchells, and the Agnews hold down the blacks. The House passed and sent to the Senate today President Nixon's voting rights bill, a measure that a civil rights leader called a sellout to the South. It is a substitute for an extension of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which affected 7 southern states and put some 800,000 Negroes on the registration rolls. The administration bill would impose a nationwide ban on literacy tests for voters, but it drops a key feature of the 1965 Act, the one requiring the southern states to obtain advance federal clearance for any changes in the voting laws or procedures. As the days wear on, selective service officials in more states are saying that the lottery system will have little effect on their call-ups next year. Michigan officials have joined New York in saying that most of the men placed in 1A, including those with the last drawn lottery numbers, will be needed in next year's draft. And in Washington today, selective service officials agreed that there will be variations from state to state on how far down the lottery list the call-ups will have to go.
We at American Motors believe in fair play. Here's a chart that shows you just how much room you get in our Rebel wagon. Take this tape measure to any showroom in town and see what you get from any other wagon.
Okay.
Hi, may I help you?
Could you hold this, please?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we have exactly what you want.
Not unless you have 39.8 inches of headroom.
Headroom.
Do you really think your wife will notice an extra half-inch of hip room?
You haven't seen my wife.
Well, just what did you have in mind?
91.1 cubic feet. And I don't think you're going to make it.
An inch here, an inch there. In the final analysis, it doesn't really matter. Did you add that right?
You know, you were right.
Our Rebel wagon has more room for the money and a lower list price than any other wagon made in America. Check it out. Pick up a chart and tape measure at your American Motors dealer.
In Edgartown, Massachusetts, District Court Judge James Boyle today set January 5th for the opening of an inquest into the death of Mary Jo Kopechne, who died last July in Senator Edward Kennedy's car. Following a mid-air collision near Indianapolis earlier this year, air traffic controller groups leveled charges against the Federal Aviation Authority, headed by John Schaefer, arguing that FAA radar is often ineffective. But today, the backlash of those events, as reported by Greg Kendall of WISH-TV.
This was the scene near Indianapolis 3 months ago following the mid-air collision of a jetliner and a small private plane, an accident that killed 83 persons. The disaster also touched off a controversy about the effectiveness of radar used in air traffic control since it failed to spot the light plane. The furor developed when Indianapolis controller James Connect described it as totally inadequate and called it killer radar. This week, Connect was notified the Federal Aviation Administration plans to fire him for making the charges, saying they caused a lack of public confidence in integrity of the federal government.
I feel that the statements I made were demanded of me in my position as president of NAGE, and more so because of my concern about what I consider a totally inadequate air traffic system, a system that is really a hazard to life.
FAA Tower Chief Dwayne Jennings says because of Connect's feelings, he believes he should be fired.
Since we have not, or Mr. Connect has not altered his opinion of the radar, I cannot put him back on the radar. Plus the fact that I need complete and 100% cooperation on the shift.
Connect maintains the FAA has infringed on his right of freedom of speech and plans to take the issue to court if necessary. Craig Kendall, CBS News, Indianapolis.
Sirhan Sirhan yielded to his mother's pleas today by ending a 13-day liquid hunger strike and eating breakfast. Under a death sentence for the slaying of Senator Robert Kennedy, Sirhan had been subsisting on coffee and cocoa. In Los Angeles today, 35-year-old Charles Manson, leader of a wandering hippie group, was formally charged with the murder of actress Sharon Tate and 6 other persons. He was given until December 22nd to enter a plea to the charges. It's expected that Manson will select one or more of the prominent public attorneys who have offered their services free to defend him.
For 50 years now, we've been telling you that Bayer aspirin is the best pain reliever on earth. Well, guess what? Now Bayer aspirin has been to the moon. Of all the pain relievers you see advertised, Bayer was the one selected to go with the astronauts on their historic moon mission. Think of that the next time you need a pain reliever. For headaches, muscular aches, fever of a cold or flu, Bayer works wonders.
George, what are you doing?
It's my bronchial congestion. I can't sleep lying down. I start to wheeze and cough.
You can't sleep that way, George.
That's why there's Broncaid. Broncaid tablets to help raise phlegm, relieve bronchial congestion, restore free breathing. And for sudden attacks of bronchial asthma, take Broncaid Mist for relief that starts in seconds. Broncaid Mist opens clogged air passages, releases air trapped in your lungs. You breathe freely again. Broncaid tablets, Broncaid Mist.
The United States Information Agency said today that it is producing a film about Vice President Agnew for distribution overseas. Costing $20,000 and running 10 minutes, it's the agency's first biographical film about a vice president. The USIA said the film probably will not include excerpts from Agnew's recent speeches, concentrating instead on his career before he became a national figure. And now to Washington and Eric Sevareid for some comments on the latest policy statements of the Vice President and President Nixon. Eric?
Once again, the President and the Vice President appear to be traveling on two rather different roads. Yesterday, the President released a statement on the arts and humanities, the Vice President one on higher education. The President would double federal subsidies for not only the creative and producing arts, but for humanistic studies, including social studies. And he talks about the growing opportunities that lie in the higher levels of education. Mr. Agnew feels the colleges are already overcrowded with many people who ought not be in them. He calls the liberal arts an elegant adornment, the soft sciences, and indeed some of them, as frequently taught, are soft to the melting point. He wants an end to the sacrosanct status of the college degree and greater emphasis on manual skills, the skilled labor he says our society needs. Social antagonisms are intensified, he thinks, by the emphasis on the college degree, and he seems to be arguing that we ought not send so many to colleges because that makes the less bright feel bad. Social status is one thing. Economic status can be something else. And one new economic elite in this country already are the skilled workers. This is why many unions of skilled workers so zealously restrict their membership. Their number can be more surely increased by opening up the unions than by checking down college admissions. According to the former Harvard president, Dr. Conant, it is literally easier for a young man to get into the Harvard Medical School than into the New York Plumbers Union. Mr. Agnew worries, and properly, whether the lower schools produce enough outstanding citizens. One study done over a 10-year period at Stanford indicated that about one-half the Americans of genius and near-genius intelligence are never even discovered. They are more likely to be discovered in a college than anywhere else. Mr. Agnew thinks collegiate imbalance favors the humanities. Mr. Nixon, quite specifically, says it favors the sciences as against the humanities. So it becomes difficult to know exactly what administration policy on education and culture really is. Mr. Nixon said on Monday that the Agnew speeches are not cleared by him. If they are cleared by the White House staff, then the question arises whether the Vice President is deliberately assigned to appeal to one segment and state of mind in the country, while the President appeals to an opposite segment and general view. If the Agnew speeches are not cleared by the President or by his staff, then the question arises whether Mr. Agnew speaks for the government at all. If not, then his remarks would have to be treated on the same level as those of any other prominent private citizen. Walter.
And that's the way it is, Thursday, December 11th, 1969. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.